Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar today. We've got a great topic. It's how to level up your ABM program with buying signals and predictive orchestration. My name is Andre Yee. I am the founder and CEO of Triblio, and I'm joined today with Malachi Threadgill. He's an analyst with Forrester. And we've got a great agenda ahead. Malachi is going to walk through why buyer signals are so crucial to revenue success. And then I'm going to share examples of how real-world practitioners are operationalizing these buyer signals to grow pipeline. And then finally, we're going to provide you an opportunity to opt into a buyer signals report for your organization. And I'll tell you a little bit more about that. Before we jump into the meat of our presentation, let me tell you a little bit about Triblio. We are a leading provider of ABM solutions, and a lot of what we do, we have learned from the best, our own customers. We have over 150 customers ranging from fast-growing venture-backed companies to really global enterprises like ABB, TriNet, Disparity, NASDAQ, GE Power. And as I said, a lot of what we're doing today, we are taking from some of the great campaigns and programs that they've run. And the common thing with all these customers naturally is that they all use our platform to execute their ABM program. And so let me tell you just very briefly about our solution. Triblio offers an integrated ABM platform for you to be able to execute end-to-end ABM programs. Starts with you being able to define intent-based audiences for targeting by both fit and intent. You can then orchestrate cross-channel campaigns. And we have an ABM advertising module that allows you to target specific roles in your target account list. When you do that, you're going to see a rise, a lift in in-target account traffic. We think it's really important to be able to personalize your website, to be able to engage these potential buyers. And the entire time we score those activities such that at the right time, we're able to essentially trigger sales activation, which means delivering sales-ready follow-up through both your CRM as well as through email. And then we recognize we live in a broader ecosystem, and so we integrate with a multitude of other marketing channels. We integrate with Eloqua, Marketo, HubSpot, LinkedIn for ads, Drift with chat, as well as on the sales side, we integrate with all the major CRMs. So now that you know a little bit about us, let me pass you on to Malachi.
Thanks, Andre. I'm incredibly excited to be here. As Andre said, I'm a principal analyst on the demand and account-based marketing team here at Forrester. And in proper Forrester SiriusDecisions form, I'm going to open my part of the presentation with an analogy. And the analogy is around signal-to-noise ratios. Whether we have a truck driver that is using a CB radio going down the highway, sharing important information, or just chatting with other truck drivers, or a scientist that is collecting data from everywhere in the universe, trying to decipher if extraterrestrial life exists. A variety of people are trying to connect and collect a variety of signals and infer insights from those signals. Now we have two types of signals. We have the signal on the left, which is a high or strong signal-to-noise ratio. The signal is easy to decipher. And commonly, we also have what are called low signal-to-noise ratios, where the signal is constant, but we're trying to measure the variance that may be meaningful but harder to detect. And these signals, we've traditionally called as marketers intent signals. We still call them intent signals to this day. But SiriusDecisions and Forrester have retermed this concept around the concept of what we call buying signals. So when we think of a buying signal, it's a combination of our first-party signals, how our target prospects and customers are engaging directly with us, as well as third-party behavioral data at the account, buying group, and contact level. The reason this is important is because historically, the intent signals have evolved from a variety of processes, and there's a lot of confusion in the market today in terms of what an intent signal actually is. Is it a category that is ranked from low, medium to high, or is it actually detailed information of an individual and how they're researching online online, or how they're directly interacting with you, as well as the combination of individuals that are all producing a variety of signals at any given time. And how do we detect and uncover those? But let's dive a little bit deeper. I said before there's a variety of signals, and on the right-hand side of the screen, you'll see from form fills to content through publisher networks or content syndication, from web visits and other aggregators, we can collect these signals. And these signals, these waveforms, start taking on different shapes. And we can start to understand that this waveform means that if we combine more than one signal, we can start to understand more meaningfully what is really going on versus what has traditionally been an intent signal that is one indicator when there could be fewer or a few indicators to many indicators across, as once again, the members of the buying group that are showing these signals when they're ready or when they're having those research moments around what they're trying to understand. So we know that organizations today are collecting these signals, but the challenge that a lot of organizations have is they have limited accuracy and the ability to understand the bigger picture around how they can actually use these signals in a meaningful way for their organization. We conducted an annual report around the state of ABM, and the data has just come out for Forrester. And so I want to share a little bit of this data as it relates to our buying signals in more detail. What's incredibly interesting is that organizations that are practicing account-based marketing are collecting buying signals. In fact, 71% of North American companies are collecting and using these signals, but 80% of the rest of the world is actually using these signals. The moment, or not the moment, but the fact that 80% of the rest of the world is collecting these signals is incredibly meaningful, showing that these insights are profound and powerful. But the challenge is that organizations are still struggling to figure out how they use these signals. 39% of North American organizations leverage buying signals to actually select their target accounts and actually prioritize how they're going to deploy their marketing tactics against those accounts. In the rest of the world, it drops even to 31%, which means that in the rest of the world, they're collecting more signals and using fewer. But that 39% of North American, less than half of companies today that are collecting them are actually using them appropriately. So I want to dive in a little bit more about how organizations are struggling and why they're struggling with these signals, so you can understand things that you can change to better utilize these signals in a meaningful way. So the challenges, the top 3 challenges that we have identified are the ability to integrate. The integration of the varieties of intent or buying signals is complex, and a lot of organizations are trying to do this either manually or through some process that isn't well thought or well defined, and they're not looking at how the objects are interacting with each other to collect those insights to deploy their variety of tactics. This leads us to the usability issues. Oftentimes the data comes in a variety of paths. There's different types of intent data or buying signals that I've alluded to before, from just account level data from low, medium, or high, all the way to those leads or contacts for engaging with specificity around a certain topic through a content syndication platform or otherwise. And this leads to the ability to scale. If we can't figure out how to collect and integrate this data and actually use the data, our ability to scale becomes very, very challenging. In fact, 23% identify that this is a big challenge in our latest report. The result of those 3 major issues shows us that the biggest challenge is this operationalization. There isn't a challenge about buying the data or collecting the data. The issue is around operationalization. And here are the 7 biggest issues that we've identified. First and foremost, how do we actually operationalize it into our CRM or SFA integration? I've already talked about the integrations, but whether it's doing it manually through a form handler or working with a partner like Triblio that can actually ingest the data and import the data, organizations need to be thinking about how can they get this data into a meaningful way. Additionally, organizations are collecting the data and they're not collecting the metadata in a lot of cases around the intent data. So I've seen organizations that they say, okay, I'm collecting intent data. Now I'm going to change the field to intent data on this topic is positive. And they leave it that way in perpetuity. So the accuracy of that intent data, the fatigue or data fatigue that is assigned to that intent data over time is going to decay. So how do organizations think about how they're collecting the data from an accuracy, timing, and how do they think about the metadata that is incorporated into that? Third is measurement. How do we understand how the intent data is affecting what we're doing? Whether it is the connection rate of our BDR team or the win rate of our sales team, or even the funnel velocity, we can start understanding how accounts that are showing intent signals or buying signals versus accounts that are not showing these signals, and create control groups to understand and interpret how these signals are meaningful for us today. The myriad of channels. So as I alluded to earlier, the definition of intent data has become very broad. But when we talk about buying signals, we can collect them from all the forms that I showed on that previous slide that became that sine wave or the voice wave. And when we think about the myriad of channels, we have to think about what is the value of that channel? What is the value of that signal for my particular product? Do I want to go with an intent provider or find intent data that covers a gamut of topics, but it gives me just account level insights? So do I want to go very narrow into a niche type of environment where I can collect intent signals, but only on a certain topic, but the insights from that intent data are incredibly valuable and accurate? Additionally, how do we attribute these signals with our buying groups? How do we understand when the decision maker is interacting? And if the decision maker wants us to actually conduct our marketing to them, or does the CFO not want to come into the buying process until the very end? If we're marketing to them very early, before we understand what their signals are, what their intent is, what those buying signals that we're collecting are, we may be hurting our opportunities because we're not using the signals properly and associating with the members of those buying groups to deploy our tactics at the right time. How do we combine these signals? We know that an individual signal is valuable, but when we start adding additional signals, 1 + 1 really does equal 3. We can combine these signals into more meaningful insights. Say if we're collecting an intent signal here, buying signal here, and we have first-party data, what is that magnitude effect? How does that affect our win rate? How does that affect our conversion rate? So the combination of these signals becomes incredibly powerful. And lastly, as this slide can allude to, data overload. There's a lot that we can do with these buying signals. How we collect the buying signals, how we integrate the buying signals, how we derive the insights and deploy our tactics against them is incredibly complex. Doing it manually is very, very, very tedious. And the more tedious it is, the more we interact with the data, the more we change the data to conform, it becomes more challenging for us to accurately and insightfully and timely respond to that data in a meaningful way. So what we find is that successful organizations are able to leverage these buying signals throughout the entire process. They collect signals, they combine signals, they mold signals, and those signals help them with their strategy. And the strategy ultimately helps them deliver on the customer experience. Whether that customer experience is signing a new logo because you're a better offer for them, or it's retaining a current customer, or upsell and cross-sell between them. These signals are a meaningful piece of that. But what has been missing historically is a cohesive, concise orchestration layer within our signals strategy, orchestration, and delivery that allows us the ability to actually combine the variety of signals that are out there today. And I'm going to hand it back to Andre right now because he's going to dive deeper into that orchestration piece.
Great. Thank you, Malachi. Appreciate it. Really good insight there. I really appreciate the data from Forrester. Fantastic. Let me pick up where Malachi left off to talk about how to operationalize buyer signals today. But I think before we do that, it might really be helpful to sort of unpack the world of intent data or buyer signals in a little more detail. And by the way, bear in mind, I'm going to be using the terms buying signals and intent data interchangeably for the rest of this presentation. But probably the first thing I want to say is this. Not all buying signals are created equal. Right? There are a lot of differences between buying signals, a lot of nuances that need to be taken into consideration, and that's actually partly what I want to jump into. As marketers, very often when we talk about leveraging intent data or buying signals, we're typically referring to third-party intent data. Right? That may those are intent signals from third-party content sites. That might be when someone watches a video online, or they download an Analyst report, or they read a blog from an industry expert, right? And those are really important signals that you can pick up. And there are data vendors that make a living just supplying this intent data. We happen to partner with one of the best, a company called Bombora. We've integrated their data into our platform seamlessly, and a lot of our customers use that as part of their ABM programs. But there's also what's known as first-party intent, right? And first-party intent is really intent data or buying signals that emanate from buyer interactions on your website or in response to your campaign. Think about when a visitor comes to your website and they read a case study, or they respond to your email campaign. All those are examples of first-party intent signals. And this even includes offline data. So, for instance, if you get a signal of someone attending one of your user groups, or if you invited a VP of operations from one of your top target account lists, and they show up at your VIP event, that's a meaningful signal, first-party intent signal. It's not online, it's offline, but it's meaningful. So the key to identify what I would call true purchase intent or true buying intent is really about connecting the dots between these activities. That's essentially what you have to do to make sense of whether someone has true buying intent. So let me talk a little bit more about the pros and cons of both first-party and third-party intent signals. So I think the obvious good news about first-party intent is that you own the data, right? You own this data because it's data related to responses to your campaigns or visitors to your website. So this means that data is captured in your web analytics, it's in your marketing automation platforms, it's in your CRM. And that's the good news. The other good news is that first-party intent actually provides a really strong and reliable signal of buying intent. So, for instance, if you see multiple visitors from your target account coming to your website, reading case studies, watching your customer testimonials, and then signing up for a webinar that you're hosting, all within a 4 to 5 week period, those are really, really strong signals of buying intent, right? And the downside to first-party intent is that it provides a really limited view. So all you're seeing are responses to your campaigns. All you're seeing are potential buyers that have engaged on your website or in response to your campaigns. And so you're seeing a very small percentage of all the potential buyers out there, and you're possibly seeing them late in the buying cycle. So first-party intent, the advantage, a really reliable signal. The disadvantage, very limited scope. And that's where third-party intent comes in. It provides a much more extensive scope. You're seeing a broad spectrum of buyer activity over a host of third-party sites, as we talked about earlier. When they download an Analyst report, when they read an industry expert blog, or watch a video, online video at a publication trade site. You're seeing all those activities, and that can really give rise to getting insight into a much broader suite of potential buyers out there. So let me give you an example. Imagine you're selling the next generation firewall technology, right? And you see signals from a couple of individuals, from a given account, reading an article on next-gen technologies on chiefsecurityofficer.com, right? And you get those, you get a read on those signals. Now, does that mean that you've uncovered a new buyer? Does that mean that account is in a buying cycle? Well, very possibly, but not necessarily so. If it's just one or two individuals from a company reading an article, it might mean that company is in an actual buying cycle, but it might just as likely be that those individuals are simply researching because they have an interest in the topic, right? So here's the reality with third-party intent or third-party signals. A lot of third-party intent data doesn't actually indicate buying intent. it's what I would call topical interest data, right? Which leads to the problem of depending on third-party intent data exclusively in deciding whether or not it's a true buying signal. Third-party intent data tends to be noisy, right? It's not as reliable, in my opinion, as first-party intent because there's a lot of non-actionable interest data, topical interest data that's mixed in with the true buying signal. And so to summarize, first-party intent, reliable signals, but very limited in scope. Third-party intent, much more extensive, but noisy. And so the takeaway here, I would say, is this. To leverage buying signals effectively, you have to combine both first-party intent with third-party intent signals to get a determination of true buying intent. Now, let's return to that question of how to operationalize buyer signals today. So I think to operationalize buying signals today, you have to do three things. You have to source and mine buying signals, which as Malachi said, many of you are already doing to some degree, to a high degree actually. We need to evaluate or score those signals. And finally, we need to trigger the right campaign actions based on those signals, which is something we haven't talked about yet. So, and all that is what we at Triblio call predictive orchestration, the ability to source and mine your buyer signals to be able to evaluate or score them and then trigger the right campaign action. So let me dig a little deeper into what this looks like. When we talk about sourcing intent data signals, we're talking about integrating with third-party intent data sources, as well as tapping into mining the first-party intent that you already have, as we talked about in your CRM, in your marketing automation, in your web analytics, right? And another thing to remember is that it isn't simply about online activities. It's also about offline activities as well. So the scoring, the capturing of that data is not just all about online activities. Then you need to evaluate those signals, because as we said, the primary activity we want to conduct is really separating the true buying signal from the noise of just topical interest. And so now, when we, as many of you know, when you do lead scoring, it's typically, done on a arbitrary point system. But with the multitude of channels that we're dealing with and with the complexity that's required in determining a true buying signal, it's no longer enough just to use a basic scoring, points-based scoring. You need a scoring algorithm that can score along a multitude of dimensions, including fit, intent, recency of that engagement, and then the depth of the engagement. Some people call it the FIRE algorithm or FIRE methodology, but and then there are other dimensions as well, but a lot of our customers seem to apply a algorithm similar to this. And then finally, based on that score, you want to trigger the right cross-channel play. That means potentially executing a ad campaign or personalizing the website for a particular profile of buyer, or triggering sales follow-up with a specific play, right? It also obviously means tapping into other channels like email and social. Now, I know it sounds very conceptual, and it also sounds very complex. So let me break this down by perhaps showing you a couple of examples of how different customers of ours have implemented predictive orchestration in their ABM programs. So to start with, I want to talk about Redpoint Global. Redpoint Global is a Boston-based company, and they're a leading provider of customer data platforms, or CDPs. And obviously, they compete in a very competitive market. But the marketers at Redpoint Global are really progressive. They're really data-driven marketers, and what they wanted to do with their ABM program was to really drive pipeline growth. But they had a particular challenge in doing this, and their challenge pertains to the fact that what they've learned from their selling experience is that they really cater to two buying personas. The first buying persona is a technical buyer. And the technical buyer typically is drawn to Redpoint Global, typically through keywords or topics like customer data platform or CDP or feature-related topics, features related to a CDP. And then the other buying persona is the more of the business persona, the customer success or customer experience buyer. And they typically search on customer experience platform, and they're typically drawn to more business-related issues related to customer experience, and less so on features. And so what Redpoint Global was able to do was really, through using Triblio, they were really able to shape the buyer experience for each of these two personas by appealing to both the terms as well as the messaging that would resonate with each of these personas. So and they would do that first by delivering the right ad copy with the right imaging, and then that leads to even a customized, separate and customized buyer experience on the web for each of those two personas. And it transmitted to even the sales follow-up. When the sales team would follow up, each of them would be operating from a different playbook and with a different script, right? So the customer data platform, the CDP technical buyer, they would tend to get an ad that might, first of all, use the phrase CDP or customer data platform. When they go to the web, they'll see content that focuses much more on features and functions, and also with a sensitivity to privacy and data, which typically is something that the technical buyer cares about. And then when sales follows up with them, they pick up the conversation from that perspective. And then similarly with the sort of the business buyer, if you would, that person is typically a customer success manager, or it may be a customer marketing manager, and the messaging there caters more towards ROI and benefits and the effect on customer experience, right, and customer satisfaction. So here you see essentially what Redpoint Global is able to do is really customize two tracks of the buying experience based on the intent keywords and intent signals. The next example I want to point to is a company called Disparity. They're a really highly successful company. They're listed on the New York Stock Exchange. They have over 4,000 employees, and they're in the business of selling essentially HR outsource solutions for SMB and mid-market companies. And they're very progressive marketers as well over there, really successful. And here was the challenge, actually what it doesn't say on this slide is they actually start with a total addressable market of over 6 million accounts. And out of that, through some really good ICP work that they've done, they've been able to narrow it to over 30,000 high-fit target accounts. Now, it's great being able to narrow from 6 million to 30,000, but 30,000 high-fit accounts is still a lot of accounts, and it's too large to know for the BDR team to know who do I contact, when do I contact them, and what do I say, right? And which goes to the second point. When the sales or BDR team actually ends up contacting, they don't know what to say because Disparity actually offers 5 different solution tracks. And so which one should they actually lead off with? And then finally, the reps are spending a lot of their time just cleaning up the data and account list and that kind of thing. And so here's what the marketers at Disparity did was they decided to launch a pilot program focused on one of the groups within their organization of 12 SDRs covering 6 territories. And they had a very explicit goal of increasing SDR efficiency, with the belief that if they could do it with these within the pilot program, they can then roll it out to the rest of the organization. And so here's what they did. Here's starting, as I mentioned, based on the ICP work, they developed an initial target account list of over 30,000 accounts, right? That was fed into the Triblio system. We then, through predictive orchestration, we were able to prioritize 1,500 accounts a week based on this FIRE methodology of fit, intent, recency, and engagement. Our algorithms would calculate and essentially force rank the top 1,500 best fit accounts based on those parameters. Now, why 1,500? Well, that's what they determined was the optimal number that in terms of capacity that the 12 SDRs could handle a week. And so that number certainly could be adjusted through the Triblio platform, but that's what they decided. And so it's really important, right? They didn't have to figure out which of the 3,000 should I reach out to every week. The SDR team gets served up the right 1,500 accounts to focus on. And then that's not all. We then, based on the intent signals, will automatically divide each of those accounts into 5 different messaging segments, so that when the sales or SDR picks up the conversation, they have a unique playbook that tells them what to say and a particular cadence that they execute to. And then there's also digital ad support to provide air cover. And this is really powerful, because one of the things you're seeing here is a company being able to really improve SDR efficiency, and the results were just phenomenal. After just 4 months, they found that the discovery call pace had doubled, right? So they did twice as many discovery calls. And then the improvement, they had a 5.5x improvement in contact list efficiency. And that's why our sponsor, Rich Whittington at Disparity, says the Triblio Orchestrator helps us organize all the moving parts within that account-based funnel. And there are a lot of moving parts. And a little note here that wasn't in the text is that the first deal they closed, not only did they show all these improvements in SDR efficiency, one of the things they found is the first deal they closed actually closed with 70% less time. The timeline to close was 70% less than the usual sales cycle, right? So really, what you're seeing here is really a powerful sort of demonstration of what predictive orchestration can do to optimize and scale your SDR outreach and improve your funnel results. All right, takeaways. Here are some of my takeaways for you. First, understand the buying signals for your organization. I would say start with the first-party intent signals that you already have. Are you looking at them? Do you know the accounts that are engaging with you? If you have a target list of accounts, are they even engaging with you at all, right? Second, explore third-party intent signals relevant to your market. In other words, what topics are actually triggering the research phase for the buyers in your sector? Third, evaluate and score those accounts based on key parameters. We talked a lot about fit, intent, recency, engagement. There are others as well, and some of our customers actually score on many more dimensions than those. And then finally, develop and implement custom buying experiences based on those intent signals. I gave you 2 examples, one with Redpoint Global, how they were able to push that based on 2 different personas. And then there's the example of Disparity, where they were not only able to scale this, but able to funnel sort of follow up based on 5 different messaging tracks, right? All triggered from intent signals. So before we wrap up, I do want to really draw your attention to something we're offering you today. If you're interested in exploring third-party intent signals that might be applicable for your category, for your market segment, we have something for you today. It's called the Buying Signals Report. This is where we will generate a free report for you to benchmark your current buying signals. We'll actually meet with you for 15 minutes for a discovery call. We'll get from you some of the key topics, the terms, the phrases that are applicable in your space, and then we'll generate a report and tell you, give you a sense of the kind of companies today, the accounts that are surging on those topics, so that you get a picture of the kind of companies that might be looking or exploring your solution. If you're interested, just all you have to do is just visit triblio.com/buying signals and just register for a report, and we'll set up the call to meet with you, and then we'll go from there. So with that, before I wrap up, let me bring Malachi back into the picture and say, Malachi, any last thoughts before we wrap up? I think it's fascinating, this whole topic of sort of operationalizing buying signals. But any last thoughts to you? Any last tips? Anything for our listeners?
No, thank you for having me. This is an exciting topic, and I'm passionate about it. I was passionate about it as a practitioner. I'm passionate about it here on the analyst side. And one of the things that really resonated with me was, we're the organizations that are able to figure out that orchestration of buying signals. The numbers that you shared with Disparity aren't dissimilar from a number of other signals that we're seeing. And so I highly recommend anyone who's curious on the research side also go to Forrester.com. We have quite a bit of research that's publicly available, as well as stuff behind the firewall, and you can learn more there as well. So Andre, thank you so much for having me today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks, Malachi. Thanks so much for joining. And thanks, everyone, for joining our webinar. And I wish you a great day. Take care.